I found the contract buried in Kendra's desk drawer while looking for our tax documents. My name was crossed out with red ink, replaced by hers in neat handwriting. The signature looked perfect, too perfect. I stared at the papers for a long moment, my hands trembling slightly. This was the exclusive supplier agreement for TechFlow Solutions, the company I'd built from nothing over 12 years. The company that was supposed to be mine. Kendra had signed my name without telling me, then scratched it out to put herself as the sole owner. The date was 3 weeks ago, right after I'd been in the hospital for my back surgery. While I was recovering, trusting her to handle things, she was stealing everything I'd worked for. I carefully photographed every page with my phone, then put the documents back exactly where I found them. My wife of 15 years had just declared war on me. She had no idea I was about to fight back. The discovery hit me like a punch to the gut, but I forced myself to stay calm. Kendra was downstairs making dinner, humming softly like nothing had changed. I sat on our bed, scrolling through the photos of the forged documents. The supplier agreement was worth over $2 million annually, the backbone of TechFlow's revenue stream. Without it, my company would collapse within months. But Kendra had been clever. She'd waited until I was vulnerable, drugged up on painkillers after surgery, barely able to think straight. I remembered her bringing papers to my bedside, saying they were insurance forms and hospital bills. I'd signed them without reading, trusting my wife completely. What a fool I'd been. Now I understood why she'd been so attentive during my recovery, so eager to help with business calls and meetings. She wasn't being caring, she was positioning herself to take over everything I'd built. The woman I loved had played me perfectly. TechFlow Solutions started in our garage back in 2011. I was 28, fresh out of engineering school, with nothing but determination and a crazy idea about automated inventory management systems. Kendra supported me then, or so I thought. She handled the books while I wrote code and pitched clients. Our first contract was worth $50,000, I'll never forget Kendra's excitement when that check arrived. We celebrated with cheap champagne and pizza. Over the years, TechFlow grew into something beautiful. We expanded to a real office, hired 15 employees, landed major contracts with manufacturing companies across the state. Kendra gradually stepped back from day-to-day operations as her marketing career took off. Or at least, that's what I believed was happening. Looking back now, I realize she was never really gone. She knew every client, every contract, every weakness in my business structure. While I focused on the technical side, she was learning how to take it all away from me. I'd built TechFlow, but Kendra had been studying it like a predator studies prey. The next morning, I called my lawyer from the office. Ben Rodriguez had handled TechFlow's contracts since the beginning, a sharp guy who never missed details. Ben, I need you to pull all the documents Kendra signed on my behalf during my surgery recovery, I said, keeping my voice steady. There was a pause. Chris, your wife doesn't have signing authority on TechFlow accounts. You never set up power of attorney. My blood went cold. What do you mean? She's been handling everything while I was out. Another pause, longer this time. Chris, we need to meet. Today. I hung up and stared at my computer screen, but the numbers and reports blurred together. If Kendra didn't have legal authority to sign for me, then every document with my name on it was forgery. And if she was forging my signature on supplier agreements, what else had she signed? I grabbed my jacket and headed for Ben's office, my mind racing through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Ben's office felt smaller than usual as he spread documents across his conference table. This is bad, Chris. Really bad. He pointed to signature after signature, all mine, all forged, all signed while I was recovering from surgery. Kendra had been busy. She'd transferred 3 major contracts to shell companies she controlled, redirected payments to accounts I'd never seen, and somehow convinced 2 of my biggest clients that she was now TechFlow's primary contact. How is this possible? I asked. Ben shook his head. She's been planning this for months, maybe longer. Look at these dates. Some of these shell companies were registered 6 months ago. 6 months ago, I was healthy and active in the business. Kendra had been planning my downfall while sitting across from me at dinner, while sleeping next to me every night, while telling me she loved me. The betrayal cut deeper than any business loss. This wasn't just about money, it was about trust, about the life we'd built together, about everything I thought I knew about the woman I married. I drove home that evening in a daze, Ben's words echoing in my head. Don't confront her yet. We need more evidence before we make any moves. Kendra was in the kitchen when I walked in, chopping vegetables for dinner. She looked up and smiled, the same warm smile that had captured my heart 15 years ago. How was your day, honey? She asked, as if she hadn't spent the morning stealing my life's work. Fine, I managed, hanging my jacket on the chair. Just catching up on things I missed while I was out. She nodded sympathetically. You've been working too hard since the surgery. Maybe you should take another week off. I studied her face, looking for any sign of guilt or deception. Nothing. She was either an incredible actress or she genuinely believed she was doing nothing wrong. That night, lying next to her in bed, I listened to her breathing and wondered how long she'd been planning this betrayal. When had my wife become my enemy? The next few days were torture. I went through the motions of normal life while secretly documenting everything Kendra had done. I found more forged contracts, more redirected payments, more evidence of systematic theft. She'd been careful, but not careful enough. Every fake signature had tiny differences from my real one, the way she dotted the I in my middle name, the angle of the S in Chris. A handwriting expert would spot them immediately. What amazed me was her patience. This wasn't a desperate grab for money, it was a long-term plan executed with surgical precision. She'd studied my business, identified its vulnerabilities, and struck at exactly the right moment. While I was helpless in a hospital bed, she was dismantling everything I'd built. I had to admire her strategy, even as it destroyed me. Kendra had always been smart, but I'd never realized how ruthless she could be. That was my mistake, underestimating the woman who shared my bed and knew all my secrets. On Friday morning, Kendra left early for a marketing conference in Denver. I knew it was a lie because I'd checked, there was no conference scheduled. This was my chance to search the house properly. In her home office, I found a second laptop hidden behind old photo albums. It wasn't password protected, Kendra's overconfidence working in my favor. The desktop was full of folders labeled with cryptic names, but the contents were crystal clear. She'd been communicating with several of my competitors, sharing TechFlow's client lists, pricing strategies, and proprietary software codes. In one email chain, she'd actually offered to sell them my entire customer database for $500,000. Another folder contained legal documents I'd never seen, incorporation papers for something called Stream Tech Innovations, with Kendra listed as CEO and sole owner. She wasn't just stealing my company, she was building her own empire with my stolen assets. I copied everything to a secure drive, my hands shaking with rage and disbelief. The evidence was overwhelming, but Ben warned me to be patient. We need to catch her in the act, he said. Right now, it's still your word against hers in some areas. So I waited and watched, playing the role of the recovering husband while Kendra played the devoted wife. She brought me coffee in the mornings, asked about my physical therapy appointments, and kissed me goodbye like nothing had changed. The performance was flawless, but now I could see the calculation behind every gesture. When she offered to handle a client call because I seemed tired, I knew she was positioning herself for another takeover. When she suggested I delegate more responsibilities to focus on my health, I heard the trap being set. Kendra was good, better than I'd ever imagined. But she'd made one crucial mistake, she'd underestimated me. While she was busy stealing my company, I was learning to be just as ruthless as she was. The student was about to become the teacher. My opportunity came 2 weeks later. Kendra announced she was going to visit her sister in Portland for the weekend, another lie I could easily verify. I think the break will do me good, she said, packing her bag with careful precision. All this stress with your recovery has been exhausting. I nodded sympathetically, playing my part perfectly. Take all the time you need. I'll be fine here. The moment her car disappeared down our street, I was on the phone with Ben. It's time, I said. Execute everything we discussed. While Kendra was flying to whatever secret meeting she'd really planned, I was implementing my counterattack. Ben filed emergency injunctions to freeze all the shell company accounts. My accountant reversed every fraudulent transfer we could trace. And I walked into TechFlow's office to reclaim control of my own company. My employees looked confused when I started changing passwords and revoking access codes, but they followed orders. After all, I was still officially the owner, at least until Kendra's forgeries were processed. The hardest part was calling my clients directly. These were relationships I'd built over years, and Kendra had been poisoning them slowly. Mr. Patterson, I said to our biggest customer, I need to clarify some recent communications you may have received from my wife. There was a pause. Actually, Chris, Kendra told us you were stepping back due to health issues. She said she'd be our new primary contact. My jaw clenched. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. Kendra doesn't have authority to make those changes. I'm fully recovered and back in control of TechFlow. Some clients were skeptical. Kendra had been convincing in her explanations. But most were relieved to hear from me directly. They'd grown uncomfortable with the sudden changes, the new accounts they were asked to pay, the subtle shifts in service quality. By the end of the day, I'd secured written confirmations from every major client that they would deal only with me moving forward. Kendra's carefully constructed network was crumbling, and she didn't even know it yet. Saturday evening, Kendra called from Portland. Her voice was bright and cheerful. How are you feeling, honey? Getting enough rest? I almost laughed at the performance. Much better, actually. I've been thinking a lot while you've been gone. Oh? About what? About the future. About TechFlow. About us. There was a slight pause, the first crack in her composure. What do you mean? Just that I'm ready to get back to work full-time. I've been away from the business too long. Another pause, longer this time. Chris, we talked about this. You need to take things slowly. Maybe consider bringing in a partner to help manage the workload. A partner. She meant herself, of course. That's an interesting idea, I said carefully. We should definitely discuss it when you get back. Yes, she said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. We should. She had no idea that while she was plotting my downfall, I'd already begun her destruction. Kendra returned Sunday night with gifts, a coffee mug from Portland and stories about her sister's new apartment. I listened to her lies with fascination, marveling at how easily deception came to her. She'd probably been practicing these stories during whatever meeting she'd really attended. How was your weekend? She asked, unpacking her bag. Productive, I said truthfully. I spent some time reviewing TechFlow's accounts. Found some interesting discrepancies. Her hands stilled for just a moment. Discrepancies? Nothing major. Just some payments that went to accounts I didn't recognize. Probably clerical errors from while I was recovering. She relaxed slightly. I'm sure it's nothing. You know how confusing the books can get. Yeah, I agreed. Good thing I have such detailed records of everything. That night, Kendra tossed and turned more than usual. I lay still beside her, wondering if her subconscious was finally catching up to her crimes. In the morning, she'd discover that her weekend away had cost her everything. Monday morning brought chaos to Kendra's carefully ordered world. Her first clue came when she tried to log into the shell company accounts she'd created. All frozen. Her second clue was the stack of legal documents waiting on our kitchen counter. Copies of every forged signature, every fraudulent transfer, every piece of evidence Ben and I had compiled. I sat at the table drinking coffee, watching her face change as she read through the papers. "Chris," she said slowly, "what is this?" "Evidence," I replied calmly. "Of systematic fraud, forgery, and theft. The FBI's Financial Crimes Division is particularly interested in the forged signatures." Her face went white. "You can't be serious." "Dead serious. You stole my company, Kendra. You forged my name dozens of times. You sold my proprietary information to competitors. Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" She sank into a chair, the papers scattered around her. I was trying to help. You were so sick, and the business was struggling. "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't insult my intelligence with lies. I know about Stream Tech Innovations. I know about the client database you tried to sell. I know everything." Kendra's composure finally cracked. Tears streamed down her face, but I felt nothing. The woman crying at my kitchen table wasn't the wife I'd loved, she was a stranger who'd worn Kendra's face while systematically destroying my life. "Please, Chris. We can work this out. I made mistakes, but we can fix this." "Mistakes?" I stood up, my voice rising for the first time. "You planned this for months. You registered fake companies while I was healthy and trusting you. You studied my business like you were planning a heist. I just wanted security for us," she sobbed. "TechFlow was so dependent on you. If something happened. So you decided to steal it? To forge my signature and redirect my clients?" I shook my head. "You didn't want security, Kendra. You wanted control. You wanted to prove you could take everything I built and make it yours." She looked up at me, mascara running down her cheeks. "What happens now?" I picked up my jacket and headed for the door. "Now you find out what it feels like to lose everything." At the office, my phone rang constantly. Kendra's lawyer, her business partners, the clients she'd tried to steal. Word was spreading fast through our industry, the woman who'd tried to execute a corporate coup had been exposed and stopped. My employees gathered in the conference room, confused and concerned. I owed them an explanation. Over the past few months, while I was recovering from surgery, someone has been forging my signature and attempting to steal TechFlow's assets, I announced. That person was my wife. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. These people had known Kendra for years, had trusted her, and had considered her part of the TechFlow family. All fraudulent transactions have been reversed. All stolen assets have been recovered. TechFlow remains secure and under my sole control. Katie from accounting raised her hand. "What about Kendra? Will she face charges?" I looked around the room at these loyal people who'd helped me build something great. "That depends on how cooperative she chooses to be." Kendra chose to fight. Her lawyer called that afternoon with threats and accusations. My client was acting in good faith to preserve the business during her husband's incapacity, the voice said smugly. Any signatures were authorized verbal agreements. I almost laughed. Your client forged signatures on documents worth millions of dollars. She created shell companies to hide stolen assets. She sold proprietary information to competitors. Tell me which part of that was good faith. We're prepared to prove that Mrs. Richardson had implied authority. No, I interrupted. You're prepared to dig your client into a deeper hole. But go ahead. I have recordings. The line went quiet. Recordings? Of Kendra admitting she planned this months in advance. Of her discussing selling my client database. Of her laughing about how easy it was to fool me while I was on medication. It was a bluff, but a good one. The lawyer's tone changed immediately. Perhaps we should discuss a settlement. Perhaps you should advise your client to return everything she stole and disappear quietly. That evening, Kendra came to the office. Security called me when she arrived, and I told them to let her up. She looked exhausted, defeated. The confident woman who'd stolen my company was gone, replaced by someone small and desperate. "Chris, please. We need to talk." I leaned back in my chair, the same chair I'd sat in while building TechFlow from nothing. Talk. I never meant for it to go this far. It started small, just trying to help while you were sick. But then I realized how vulnerable the business was, how much we could lose if something happened to you. So you decided to take it first. She nodded slowly. I thought if I controlled it, we'd be safe. Both of us. We? I shook my head. There is no we anymore, Kendra. You destroyed that when you forged my signature the first time. She started crying again. I love you, Chris. I've always loved you. You have a funny way of showing it. Kendra's final offer came through her lawyer the next day. She would return all stolen assets, dissolve the shell companies, and sign a confession detailing her crimes in exchange for immunity from prosecution. She's scared, Ben explained. Federal fraud charges carry serious prison time. I stared out my office window at the city where I'd built my business, where I'd thought I'd built a life with Kendra. What do you recommend? Take the deal. You get everything back, she disappears, and you avoid a messy trial that could hurt TechFlow's reputation. It made sense, but part of me wanted to see Kendra face the consequences of her actions. She'd stolen more than money, she'd stolen my trust, my peace of mind, my ability to believe in the woman I'd married. There's one more condition, I said finally. She signs over any claim to our house, our investments, everything. I want her to start over with nothing, just like I did when I built TechFlow. Ben smiled grimly. I think she'll agree to that. The paperwork took 3 days to finalize. Kendra signed every document without reading them, her hands shaking as she wrote her name. When it was over, she looked up at me across Ben's conference table. I really did love you, she said quietly. I know you don't believe that, but it's true. I studied her face, looking for any trace of the woman I'd married. Maybe you did, in your own way. But love doesn't justify theft. It doesn't excuse betrayal. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. What happens? Are somewhere else, with nothing, and you remember what it feels like to build something from scratch. Maybe then you'll understand what you tried to take from me. She gathered her purse and stood slowly. Goodbye, Chris. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say to the woman who'd tried to steal my life's work while I lay helpless in a hospital bed. With Kendra gone, I focused on rebuilding what she'd damaged. The contracts were restored, the clients were secured, but the emotional damage would take longer to heal. How do you trust again after someone you loved betrays you so completely? My employees rallied around me, working extra hours to repair relationships Kendra had poisoned. Katie found discrepancies in the books going back 2 years. Kendra had been skimming small amounts long before her major theft attempt. She was testing the system, Katie explained. Seeing what she could get away with. It made sense. Kendra was methodical, patient. She'd probably been planning to take over TechFlow since the day I married her. The thought made me sick, but it also made me angry. And anger, I was learning, was more useful than heartbreak. Anger motivated me to rebuild stronger, smarter, better protected against future betrayals. 3 months after Kendra's banishment, TechFlow was thriving again. We'd landed 2 new major contracts and developed 3 innovative products that our competitors couldn't match. I'd learned to trust my team more, to delegate without fear, to build systems that didn't depend solely on me. The company Kendra had tried to steal was now stronger than it had ever been. I thought about her sometimes, wondering where she'd ended up, whether she'd learned anything from her spectacular failure. Then I'd remember the forged signatures, the stolen assets, the months of calculated deception, and any sympathy would evaporate. Kendra had made her choice. She'd chosen greed over love, theft over partnership, betrayal over loyalty. She'd gambled everything on a scheme to steal my life's work, and she'd lost. The house felt empty without her, but it was a clean emptiness. No more lies, no more deception, no more wondering what the woman I loved was really planning. The final piece of Kendra's puzzle emerged 6 months later when Ben called with news. Remember Stream Tech Innovations? The company Kendra set up to compete with you? I did remember. It was part of her grand plan to steal my clients and rebuild my business under her control. What about it? It just filed for bankruptcy. Turns out Kendra wasn't the only one planning corporate theft. Her business partners cleaned out the accounts and disappeared to South America. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Kendra had betrayed me, stolen from me, tried to destroy everything I'd built. But she'd also been betrayed in return by people who were even more ruthless than she was. Poetic justice, I said finally. She learned what it feels like to be on the receiving end. There's more, Ben continued. She's facing criminal charges in 2 states now. Her former partners are cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for reduced sentences. The student had become the teacher, and the teacher had learned a harsh lesson about trust. A year after discovering Kendra's betrayal, I was finally ready to move forward. TechFlow had grown beyond my wildest dreams. We'd expanded to 3 locations and were considering going public. The company Kendra had tried to steal was now worth 10 times what it had been when she'd forged those first signatures. I'd started dating again, carefully this time. Trust didn't come easily after what Kendra had done, but I was learning to open up again. The woman I was seeing, Jessica, knew the whole story. She understood why I was cautious, why I protected TechFlow so fiercely, why I sometimes seemed distant when she asked about my past. She really hurt you, Jessica said one evening as we walked through the park near my office. Yeah, I admitted. But she also taught me something important. What's that? That the people closest to you can be the most dangerous. And that protecting what you build is just as important as building it in the first place. Kendra sent me a letter last month. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity won. She was living in a small town in Wyoming, working as a bookkeeper for a local business. The letter was full of apologies, regrets, and explanations I didn't need to hear. She claimed she'd found herself again, that she understood now what she'd lost when she tried to steal my company. The last paragraph stuck with me. I know you'll never forgive me, and I don't deserve forgiveness. But I want you to know that losing you was worse than losing everything else. The money, the house, the plans, none of it mattered compared to losing the man I loved. I read it twice, then filed it away with all the other evidence of her betrayal. Kendra was part of my past now, a lesson learned and a mistake I'd never repeat. TechFlow continued to grow, my new relationship was building on honest foundations, and I'd learned to trust again, carefully, but completely. The woman who tried to steal my life's work had ended up teaching me the most valuable lesson of all, that what you build with integrity will always be stronger than what you take through deception.